Let us pray. Lord God, on this beautiful June morning, we give you thanks for the privilege of being right here, for your Spirit moving through word and song and music. We ask your Spirit to move into the words about to be spoken and heard, into that which will be thought and felt, so that in all ways we honor the living and the loving Christ in our midst. Amen. When you look at the story that Larry read to you, you will see that Joseph went through a very defined four-step process to actually be able to forgive his brothers. In the interest of being a full-service church, on your bulletin insert, we have room here, if you would like, to make notes about the four things that Joseph did that enabled him to release his brothers from payback. Remember, Joseph could have done that. So if you'd like to take notes, here they are, four numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, to be able to do just that. And the first thing that you can put down there, if you would like to keep track, is this, that Joseph put things in perspective. I love it when he said, "I'm Joseph, your brother. Come close." Get the idea? Come here. Because the last time Joseph came close to the brothers, you know what the brothers did. Beat him up, almost killed him, then sold him into slavery. And now Joseph says, "Come here." Tiptoe there. And what does he say? But he says, "Actually, God sent me down here through you to save lives." He was able to do the most amazing thing, which was step back and to look at a greater purpose. Now, I don't think you could say that God made his brothers do tacky things to Joseph, but you can say, from Joseph's viewpoint, that God is using that to bring about something amazing. And that was ultimately, because of this, you will have Israel being saved through Moses being led out of Egypt. But Joseph is able to see God working even in the midst of his great pain. I do not think that when Joseph was in the bottom of the dry well, hurting and bleeding, he said, "Oh, God must have a reason for this." No. It took a while for him to be able to work past what we would all say if we were in Joseph's position at the bottom of the well, which was, "I don't deserve this. How mean of them to hurt me." That's natural. But after a while, he stood back and he saw it in a greater perspective. What about you? What about me in the times when we get hurt by people? Like Joseph, immediately when we're at the bottom of that dry well, we would not be able to separate ourselves look from our feelings and look at a broader picture. But isn't it amazing that that is the key, the first step in forgiving? In the right moment, at the right time, you're able to look at that person who did something bad to you and just wonder about the person. What's that person's background? Why did that person act that way? Is God able to do something through this? Is God working in the midst of this awful thing that this person did? I used this story in a sermon some while back here, but this is appropriate to retell it. A man had this brand new sports car. We'll call it a Corvette. No, we'll call it a Mustang Cobra Shelby GT 500, if you remember that other sermon. And he visited a friend in a hospital, and as he was pulling out from his parking spot, wham, SUV slams into him. He is instantly enraged, but he holds his tongue enough as he gets out of his car to check on the driver of the SUV. It's a woman who says she's fine and then breaks into tears. She was coming from her doctor who just had diagnosed her with cancer. She was wondering what the future held for her and her family. And just as quickly as the man was enraged, so did that anger leave him, because he suddenly understood what was going on behind being hit by her. They talked. He even managed to pray with her before they exchanged insurance information and went on their way. He understood that she had just received a diagnosis. Friends, all of us receive diagnoses. We all have something wrong. And that's what causes us to sin, and that's what causes us to hold grudges. And when we're able to step back, that is when we start the process of something healthy that can deal with our illness. Put things in perspective when you get hurt. The second thing that you can write down, the second thing that you can note that Joseph did is this: confront the other person. He said, I am Joseph, your brother. I'm the one you sold to Egypt. Note, he could also have said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you beat up, whom you tried to kill, who you threw down a dry well, and who you sold to Egypt. That would really have scared them as they came closer. And yet, he didn't. He didn't pursue that any farther. But he did say, here is what you did to me. And he did not make any excuses, and he just laid it right out in front of them. That's what you have to do when someone has done something similar to you, something hurtful, something hateful. And the easiest thing in the world is just to ignore it. Let bygones be bygones, but it doesn't work that way. Just as you cannot ignore physical violence, neither can you ignore spiritual violence. It will eat away at your soul. I am Joseph, the one you sold to Egypt. You did this. Here's the way it felt. And when you say that and have the courage to say that to that person that's easier to ignore, well, then you call out that elephant in the room with the two of you. You elicit some response from that other person. You set the groundwork into being, hopefully, for some remedy, some plan, some reconciliation, but ultimately you leave it into God's hands to move forward. It has to be given. It has to be stated simply. And when you do that, you can move into the third thing that Joseph very brilliantly and honestly did. He announced that he moved on. What a fascinating thing that he said to them. You know, after he said, you sold me to Egypt, in slavery in Egypt, what he then went on to say was, don't be upset. Don't be angry. Well, wouldn't you want them to be a little upset and a little angry at themselves? He didn't. What he did was to essentially care for them. How are you feeling? Don't beat yourself up on this, like you beat me. Don't beat yourself up. He was caring for them. How else could he have cared for them had he not been able to have shown them that he had gone on? He had moved past it. He had seen what God was doing. He was honest with them about what they had done, and then he was modeling for them, I forgive you. I want a relationship with you, and I care for you. Isn't this what Jesus meant when he said, love your enemies? How are you feeling? Don't be angry. Don't be upset. Let's move ahead. I was reading the Upper Room the other day, and a woman, Karen, had written about how she was grieved over a troubled relationship she had with a family member. And finally she said, we have to have some resolution. So she had made an appointment, made a time where they would sit down and talk. And Karen finally asked for forgiveness from this family member. Person thought about it and said, I will not forgive you. But let's just go ahead and not mention it again. And Karen talked about how that hurt her. Because she knew that unless you're able to forgive, like that spiritual violence, which is what sin is, it's going to continue to fester and to hurt. she went to God in prayer. She said that night, "What should I do?" And she heard the Lord say to her, "You pray that this family member will desire my peace." Will desire my peace. Because when you do that, then is when you're able to move on. You move on to something positive. And finally, what is that positive thing? Well, you sort of announce that, and then you do something to make sure that all of what you have said is really true and is really honest. After he had done all of this, after he had revealed himself, after he had put things in perspective, after he confronted him, after he had said that he'd moved on, then he ends with this. "So hurry, brothers, go back to your father. Tell him this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me master of all Egypt." Joseph was always quite humble. "He's made me master of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't delay. You may live in the land of Goshen, so you will be near me, your children, your grandchildren, your flocks, your herds, everyone. I will support you there, so you, your household, and everyone with you won't starve." And the brothers are still close to him, and they still haven't said anything. Have you noticed? It's like they're still too stunned. And finally, it ends. Joseph threw his arms around his brother Benjamin's neck and wept. And Benjamin wept on his shoulder. He kissed all of his brothers and wept, embracing them. After that, his brothers were finally able to talk to him. I wonder what they said. Don't know. But we do know that they said it with tears running down their cheeks. Tears. Something very important, something very powerful behind tears. If you're a baseball fan, you will remember this incident because in 2010, when the Detroit Tigers were playing the Cleveland Indians, there was a young pitcher for the Tigers, Armando Galarraga, and he had a perfect game going into the ninth inning. Now, perfect game for you unbelievers who are not baseball fans is this: no hits, no walks, nothing. 27 batters up, 27 batters down. And he had brought this into the ninth inning. First batter, out. Second batter, out. And now there is just one out away before Armando Galarraga would become only the 21st player in Major League history to throw a perfect game. Throws the pitch. Batter grounds it to an infielder. Throws over to first base, and the batter is out. Everyone sees he's out, except the umpire. Jim Joyce, a veteran umpire of 20 years plus, was in a position in such a way that what he saw was that he was safe. And this was in the days before you could challenge, before instant replay. So the umpire's call stood. And it stood that the batter was safe, and the young man who worked so hard was denied his place in baseball history. Well, now, the replay afterwards that the umpire that Joyce saw clearly showed that the batter was out. And some umpires would have said, well, this is baseball. I'm sorry, I really feel sorry for the young man, but that's the way it goes. I mean, umpires call it as we see it, and sometimes we're wrong. I feel bad for him. But that's not what Joyce did. So distraught was he, they did something that umpires don't do. He goes to the Tigers clubhouse and asked to have a conversation with the young man, the young pitcher. They talk, and the umpire asked for forgiveness. And Armando said, I forgave him because I was most moved by the water in his eyes. The next day, the next game, as fate would have it, as an honor, Armando Galarraga brought the lineup card to home plate to give to the umpires. And whose turn was it to be the home plate umpire to receive it? None other than Jim Joyce. Look at what happened.
Well, here they come. The four-man umpiring crew is headed out to the field right now. Jim Joyce will be the home plate umpire. There is Jim Joyce crossing the threshold right now, and hopefully Tigers fans will give him a hand. You can see the emotion on the face of Jim Joyce.
Oh, this is so amazing. Amazing.
This is something that he has obviously never had to deal with in his career. He is trying to deal with it right now. He is trying to hold back the tears. And Jim Joyce is standing up like a man today, and he is calling balls and strikes, and he has just taken the lineup card.
Not only is he standing up like a man today, but he stood up like a man last night after he made the call.
Jim Joyce wiping away the tears as he takes the Tigers lineup card and the Indians lineup card as well. And here's a man that has been umpiring in the major leagues for over 20 years. He has seen it all. And he has done it all, but he has not done what happened last night and has not experienced that. And now a hand for Armando Galarraga as he walks back. What a special moment here today.
What a special moment here today. Do something that shows you're sincere. Show something that you moved on, that you want to forgive or be forgiven. Do something. Tears are a nice start. Well, I hope you've been able to fill out, if you wish, the 4 steps process of forgiveness. And maybe one or two of them will really speak to you in your situation with whomever, possibly, who has offended you, or maybe someone that you need to ask forgiveness from. I don't know. But you might want to hear this footnote that could be included at the bottom of this sheet. It comes from a quote attributed to C.S. Lewis. There is someone I love even though I don't approve of what he does. There is someone I accept though some of his thoughts and actions revolt me. There is someone I forgive though he hurts the people I love the most. That person is me. To deal with someone else's sin, friends, perhaps we must first deal with our own. Amen.